expected increase in demand from lithium-ion batteries is not going to happen because the technology's moved on, and most of the new lithium batteries don't have any nickel or cobalt in them. So there was an expectation that the demand for nickel was going to rise 400, 500,000 tonnes per annum, and that's not going to happen. At the moment, only about 4 or 5% of global nickel supply goes into batteries.
And in the meantime, Indonesia has been building its nickel capacity backed by China for at least a decade. Andrew Forrest's Wailu spent nearly $800 million on 3 nickel mines in WA just 7 months ago. He's since shut them. What does the future of the Australian sector look like?
Well, the nickel price has fallen to about $7.30, $7.15 a pound, so it's below $16,000. Those mines that Wailu bought really need a price of sort of $8.50, something over $20,000 a tonne US for nickel. And so really the price of nickel has fallen to a point where those mines in Australia can't make money. The mines in Indonesia are very low cost. Even though they're only making a low quality nickel ferrite, which only has 10 or 15% nickel in it, that nickel, when it comes into the market, priced at about a 30% discount to the nickel that's made in Australia. So really they're undercutting the market. That nickel, most of it goes into making stainless steel, which is where 70% of nickel ends up. But the Chinese have now found a way of producing a nickel matte, which can make the nickel sulfate that goes into batteries as well. So they're really, sort of cutting the lunches of the high-cost nickel sulfate producers in Australia.
And so does that mean you would expect further contractions here, more mine closures and job layoffs?
Sure. I mean, it's a very cyclical industry. Over the last 20-odd years, people would remember the Poseidon boom back in the late 60s. The price of nickel has been very dynamic. It's been low for 3 or 4 years, then it skyrockets up again. So I think that there'll be some sort of consolidation in the industry. It's now about a 3.3 million tonne a year industry. Australia only produces about 4 or 5% of that. And Indonesia, along with the Philippines, I mean, together they're producing about 60% of the world's nickel.
Indonesia's presidential frontrunner Prabowo Subianto is reported to have expressed enthusiasm for the country's nickel downstreaming policies. Can Indonesia's dominance be countered?
The Indonesians made a fairly solid decision about a decade ago when they said to the Chinese, you can't just dig up this nickel laterite and export it to China. You have to add value locally. I mean, that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. So now they're doing that. The Chinese have spent the money on these nickel processes in Indonesia. It's very energy intensive and quite polluting of the rivers and the oceans. So it's having a negative impact on the environment. But Indonesia wants to take that nickel and go downstream into batteries. But the problem there is that really the batteries are not using the nickel that was forecast 4 or 5 years ago.
Conversations are now underway in WA between the state government and industry about possible support for the sector. Is it justified?
I don't think so. I mean, in the past, we've seen, the Kalgoorlie nickel smelter closed down. These mines that Wailu bought were originally, most of them, Western Mining, and then they were closed down. They were bought by Mincor. And so they've had phases where they'll run for 3, 4, 5 years, then they close down for 3 or 4 years and the market recovers. So I think it's not really the place of the taxpayer to come in and support these companies when people have just overpaid for assets. And really it's not, it's not something that, I don't think the taxpayer should be on the hook for that.
Peter Strachan, thank you.
You're very welcome.